Lin Jie opened the bookstore's old wooden door as usual, and a muffled chime sounded from a bronze bell. Streams of water trickled down the door frame from above, leaving traces on the dirt-covered transom window. Outside, the sky was murky, and heavy rain poured down, the pitter-patter and vapor creating a foggy curtain. Puddles had accumulated outside the store. Lin Jie frowned and remarked on the heavy downpour, feeling miffed that his shirt and trousers were getting wet. A voice from the neighboring shop's TV mentioned that the heavy precipitation, which had started the previous night, would continue for about a week, with a yellow warning issued by the meteorological center that could escalate to red. The rain quickly drowned out the audio from the TV next door. Lin Jie pulled out a triangular supporting frame and wooden board from behind the door to make a simple step at the entrance before flipping the hanging sign to display "Open." He thought it unlikely that there would be many customers in such weather, anticipating a quiet day for the bookstore. Despite this, he considered that someone caught in the rain without an umbrella might need a place to wait it out. He took a book from the rental shelf and headed toward the counter, casually flicking on a warm lamp along the way and placing a towel by the side. Then he brewed 2 cups of piping hot tea before settling behind the counter. Lin Jie flipped the book to where he had last stopped and pushed a cup of hot tea across the counter, as if offering it to a new acquaintance. He took a sip from his own cup and smiled, embodying the kind-hearted romantic known by his customers as an honest man and life mentor adept at offering comforting advice. The second man's head fell to the ground, eyes wide open. Ji Jishio pushed the 2 bodies away and walked out of the alley, leaving behind a heap of more than 10 corpses that gradually burned and turned to ashes. Blood had seeped through her black formal dress during the fight, dripping onto the ground and evaporating into acrid steam, immediately washed away by the rain. Her body temperature rose rapidly, and her blood and muscles squirmed painfully, alerting her to broken ribs. However, as a hunter with sordid blood injected into her bloodstream, she knew it would only take an hour to fully recover. She muttered that she needed time and looked ahead. Through the curtain of rain, she vaguely saw a bookstore with faint light peeking through its glass windows, where rows of bookshelves were faintly visible. Aside from the bookstore, everything else in the area was dark. Many shops were nearby, but due to the heavy rain, only this one was open. The hanging sign displayed "Open," and a crudely made step at the entrance looked incongruous with the surroundings. Coincidentally, it was located directly opposite the alley she had emerged from. Ji Jishio wondered if it was a coincidence or a trap, but had no luxury to think further. She believed fellow hunters could sniff her out even in the downpour and needed to find somewhere to hide and buy time to recover. She retracted her long blade into its mechanism, turning it into a seemingly ordinary black metal cane in an instant. She trudged toward the bookstore and pushed its door open. Inside, the bookstore was very quiet. Ji Jishio stepped in with her cane and quickly spotted the boss behind the counter. A young man seated, reading a book. He wore a black shirt and trousers, with dark, slightly messy hair contrasting his fairly pale skin. His slender fingers held a teacup as he gently flipped the pages. Another cup of tea, still steaming, sat on the counter, but no one occupied the stool in front of it. Ji Jishio sensed that the cup and seat were prepared for her and quickly scanned the narrow, cramped bookstore. Bookshelves brimmed with books, many strewn across the floor. Half of the stairway to the second floor was blocked by bookshelves, and the windows were mostly caked with dust, creating an eerie vibe. The only light came from a lamp on the countertop, and the young man behind it exuded an air of mystery. A towel lay on the counter beside the tea. Water dripped from Ji Jishio's drenched body, her wet hair sticking to her neck, and her low-cut dress revealed fair, supple skin. Lin Jie looked up, warm yellow light reflecting in his dark pupils. He smiled and pushed the cup of hot tea toward her, remarking that his long wait had not been in vain, as the rain had washed a beautiful customer into his humble bookstore. He complimented her appearance as part of good service, noting that despite being drenched, her delicate features and ivory-white skin were still discernible in the dim light. He felt the wait was worthwhile and thought that perhaps this customer needed a heart-to-heart chat and might become a regular. Ji Zhishou eyed the cup of tea with narrowed pupils and questioned whether the young man had been deliberately waiting for her or if other motives were at play. The bookstore's coincidental timing and the man's unruffled expression suggested things were not simple. She considered whether he was affiliated with Secret Right Tower, the Truth Union, or a liaison of Walpurgis. Becoming more vigilant, she discreetly moved her finger toward the button that activated the Black Cane's mechanism, ready to transform it into a killing blade if the young man made a move. She asked if he had been waiting for her. Lin Jie answered with a kind smile, affirming that he believed fate worked in miraculous ways, bringing two strangers together unexpectedly. He gestured toward the counter and invited her to use the towel to dry herself, assuring her it was unused, and asked if she wanted him to turn on the heater. Ji Zhishou hesitated, picked up the towel, and shook her head, declining. Lin Jie took a closer look at his customer and noticed her tightly creased brows. Drawing from past experience, he surmised she might be facing a predicament and cleared his throat to ask if she had encountered some trouble. Over the years, Lin Jie had interacted with many customers and developed basic observation and communication skills. The phrase "you seem to have encountered some trouble" was a psychological suggestion, designed to prompt reflection and open conversation, much like a fortune teller's vague statements. Ji Zhishou, drying herself, suddenly stopped and looked up at the smiling young man behind the counter. She admitted to having encountered a vexing problem. She was uncertain whether he was friend or foe, but in her weakened state, escape seemed unlikely, so she decided to play along to learn his intentions. Lin Jie noticed her eyes were iron gray with glittering specks resembling polished gems, and a fresh 3-centimeter gash on her ear still glistened with blood. He concluded she had many stories to share. Lin Jie asked if her troubles involved interpersonal relationships, a likely issue for a woman of her age besides the downpour. The vague term allowed room for error, a common technique among swindlers, mediums, and himself. Ji Zhishou's heart grew heavy. Only 20 minutes earlier, she had been betrayed by her hunter group in a secret venue, and those hunting her now were her ex-comrades blinded by greed. Lin Jie's guess about her interpersonal troubles was accurate. Ji Zhishou was shocked by how quickly he knew about her betrayal, suspecting either informants within her hunter group or some all-knowing ability on Lin Jie's part. She watched silently as the towel, now soaked with dark red blood, evaporated into wisps of tart smoke. She then sat by the counter, tapping her fingers lightly against the teacup, and softly revealed that she had been betrayed. Lin Jie raised his eyebrows, intrigued by the melodrama, wondering if it involved a boyfriend's affair or a close friend's betrayal. Though interested, he maintained his role as a life mentor rather than a gossip. He remarked that betrayal could also reveal the true nature of people, topping up her tea before continuing that those who choose to leave will find reasons to justify their departure. Ji Zhishou deeply related to his words, knowing the magic of a mirror had only ignited her ex-comrade's greed, and that the outcome would have been the same eventually. She rubbed her cold hand on the cup and self-deprecatingly said she had already lost too much from the betrayal, questioning the use of seeing through them now. Lin Jie felt sympathy, recognizing that wounds of the heart took longer to heal than physical ones. He placed his hands on his chin, scrutinizing her before resolutely stating that her pain would make her wiser, as she had learned to discern true faces and false intentions and would no longer pity those who hurt her. Ji Zhishou stared into Lin Jie's ink-black eyes, feeling her breathing grow heavier under the dim, warm light. His eyes seemed to carry a mysterious magic, conveying sympathy and partiality, as if he were a higher being guiding humans toward the right path. After a moment, she shook her head vigorously, sensing he had a purpose in approaching her. She concluded he was not an enemy but an ally who wished to help her deal with the hunter group. Recognizing that hunters who used dream beast blood were considered evil by upright magicians, Ji Zhishou deduced Lin Jie was a high-level magician hostile to hunters, not affiliated with any factions she had guessed earlier. The hunters were skilled manipulators of language and words. Stealing her resolve, Ji Zhishou took a deep breath and asked what she should do. Lin Jie replied that since her enemies had acted inhumanely, she need not uphold civility. She could repay them in kind, a tooth for a tooth, an eye for an eye. He avoided offering empty platitudes that might numb her spirit, insisting that one must retaliate decisively against scum. Though Ji Jixio appeared bewildered, Lin Jie's clear direction offered her a way to free herself from confusion and take action. The disposition of a true magician. Ji Jixio revealed her other palm, hidden beneath the table, which was stained with blood. Her lips moved slightly, questioning whether she should cast aside her humanity. She was neither prepared nor resolved to go that far yet. Lin Jie advised her to first ascertain her thoughts and intentions before preparing herself properly. He calmly smiled at the now pensive woman and suggested she might need a certain book. Rather than drawing attention by selecting a book from the shelves, he slid over the one he had been reading, Confessions. Ji Jixio accepted the book with a blank expression. The cover bore 3 words, Blood and Beast. Though she had read many books in her life, she had never seen this one before. She wondered if it was by an obscure author and why Lin Jie had given it to her. With a slight frown, she hesitantly flipped open the book. Her pupils contracted and her expression shifted as she took in the densely packed ancient characters on the page. These characters warped, combined, and fluctuated continuously, forming meaningful sentences, each capable of thousands of words. She recognized it as taboo knowledge. Her face paled and her body trembled as nausea overtook her. She closed the book quickly and struggled to steady her breathing. A message had already been etched into her terrified mind. Beast mutation. Ji Jixio nearly leapt from her seat in shock but restrained herself at the last moment. The words felt as if branded into her mind, accompanied by a searing pain. She recalled that beast transformation involved drawing power from blood and using blood to control. Her hands trembled as she held the book, struggling to comprehend the content. Hunters gained strength from the sordid blood of dream beasts, injecting themselves with drugs derived from it to access abyssal power. However, the first injection was extremely risky and often fatal, marking the threshold for becoming a hunter. If the dosage exceeded a certain limit, hunters lost control over the sordid blood's devastating power and became infected, undergoing a phenomenon with 3 stages: personality distortion, loss of rationality, and physical mutation. The higher the concentration of sordid blood, the stronger the hunter and the transformation's prowess. Among physical mutations, beast mutation was the most common and nearly impossible to control. Veteran hunters who accumulated too much sordid blood gained unimaginable strength but suffered greatly from beast mutation. Ji Jixio had considered casting aside her humanity to undergo a second injection to gain power for vengeance, but she never expected Lin Jie to provide a method to control sordid blood, a problem unsolved by hunters or magicians since ancient times. Her voice raspy and trembling with a mixture of excitement and agitation, she asked if this was what he wanted her to do. Lin Jie was a madman, an unbelievably powerful one. This knowledge alone could topple the current hunter system and free hunters from their reliance on sordid blood. This undertaking was akin to a crusade to change the old world with uncertain outcomes. She could be hailed as a saint or condemned as a sinner. He reflected that tears did not only signify sadness but also readiness to let go of the past and move forward. After revealing her vulnerability, she needed an injection of self-confidence to face the world proudly. In a lowered tone, Lin Jie urged her to cast aside remorse and face herself honestly. He recited an excerpt from Confessions, declaring that when the last trumpet sounded, he would present himself before the sovereign judge with the book in hand, proclaiming his actions and thoughts, both vile and virtuous. He smiled at Ji Jixio and remarked that, like wild beasts, everyone had primitive desires. That was reality. She raised her head to see him raise his cup and clink it against hers, proposing a toast to a new tomorrow. After a long pause, Ji Jixio put down the book, picked up the cup earnestly, smiled, and nodded prudently in response, thanking him for his guidance and agreeing to comply with his wishes. Lin Jie took a sip but froze when he noticed Ji Jixio gulp down the entire cup of tea, a symbolic gesture he had not intended. He worried about the tea's heat, but reasoned that she had just been jilted and might not be in the right frame of mind. He set down his cup uneasily and hesitated before asking if she needed to go to the hospital. Ji Jishou shook her head, assuring him she was fine. Most of her wounds had healed during their exchange, thanks to the power of sordid blood. Satisfied, Lin Jie assumed she was well since she continued speaking casually. He then offered her the chance to rest a little longer, producing a black umbrella from beneath the counter and shaking it. He lamented that his cramped bookstore lacked space and that he could only keep her there until nightfall. Lin Jie handed Ji Jishou an umbrella, telling her she could take it along with the book and reminding her that the due date for returning the book was 1 month, with a maximum extension of 7 days. He emphasized that she should bring the umbrella back when she returned the book. The store felt more like a book warehouse, with only shelves and books inside. Ji Jishou accepted the umbrella and took the register book Lin Jie passed to her to write down her personal details and sign. She then cautiously asked Lin Jie about himself. Surprised, Lin Jie quickly adopted a professional smile and introduced himself as the ordinary owner of the bookstore who liked helping others. He placed the book in a plastic bag and glanced at her name in the register, Ji Jishou. The name was familiar. It belonged to the sole daughter of the underground resource magnate Ji Buodong. Her custom-made evening gown further confirmed his suspicion. He silently tucked the register away, realizing she was quite an important figure and thinking he could earn enough money to renovate the bookstore. Ji Jishou assumed Lin Jie was unwilling to reveal his identity, but felt anticipation instead of disappointment. She regarded this interaction as a trial to prove herself worthy, determined to use her strength to eliminate traitors and return within the 1-month deadline before moving on to the next step. She stepped back from the counter, holding the cane under her armpit and the book and umbrella in her hands, then bowed deeply and wished Lin Jie good night. Lin Jie scratched his head, noting her overly formal etiquette despite her affluent background. Ji Jishou exhaled deeply, rose, and left the store. She closed the door, opened the umbrella, and stepped into the rain. Suddenly, she tensed, grasping her cane, ready to activate its mechanism as a stooped old man holding a book and an umbrella approached. She stood still in the pouring rain, unable to react as an invisible force stiffened her body and cold sweat ran down her back. The old man wore an outdated Western-style suit and a gentleman's hat. His gaze fixated strangely on the book Ji Jishou held. He muttered hoarsely that it was a lucky lass who had that book. Under the umbrella's shadow, Ji Jishou could barely make out an ancient black iron mask covering his face, revealing only snake-like eyes that glared sharply at her, a dissonant contrast to his refined appearance. As he passed, she glimpsed the red words on his black book cover, "Void extinguishing." A chilling sensation swept over her skin. She sighed in relief and slowly turned her head back toward the bookstore. Muffled voices came from inside as the door closed. Lin Jie greeted the old man, calling him Old Will and asking if he had come to return a book. Old Will replied that the nickname symbolized their friendship but preferred Lin Jie to call him by his name. Lin Jie agreed, and Old Will expressed relief at the change. They discussed the new customer and the book Lin Jie had loaned her. Old Will returned the book he borrowed, and they bantered about a bet regarding the book's return within 30 days, which Lin Jie won since Old Will returned it within 20 days. Old Will admitted the book was too complicated for older readers and acknowledged Lin Jie's victory. They spoke of the book's profound content and its author, a literary giant who had passed away. Ji Jishou focused on the book and umbrella in her hands, while overhearing the casual conversation between Lin Jie and his regular customer, reflecting their deep friendship. However, she broke out in cold sweat recalling her earlier encounter with the old man, recognizing him as Frank Wilde, a destructive rank black magician known as the Faceless Black-Scaled Man. His dark green snake eyes and black iron mask were distinctive, and despite his gentlemanly appearance, he had a fearsome reputation as a cruel murderer responsible for thousands of deaths. He once clashed with the secret Right Tower's 10 Great Radiant Knights, destroying an area thousands of kilometers wide before mysteriously vanishing. According to the Truth Union's 1788 APDS classification law, extraordinary beings were graded as abnormal, pandemonium, destructive, or supreme. Wilde's name was marked as whereabouts unknown, with a reward offered by the secret Right Tower, but his destructive rank remained unchanged. Fewer than 10 destructive rank beings existed in capital city Norzen, and fewer than 100 in all of Azir. Ji Zhixio wondered why such a ruthless black magician had appeared here, and why he seemed friendly with Lin Jie. She took a deep breath and hurried away, concluding that Lin Jie must be an unbelievably powerful and mysterious magician, possibly also destructive rank. She believed she had found a formidable ally. Inside the bookstore, Lin Jie returned the book 100 Years of Solitude to the shelf and remarked that Old will seem down today. Wild was a regular customer, and Lin Jie's rundown bookstore rarely saw many visitors, but he had cultivated deep bonds with each regular through genuine engagement, encouraging their habitual visits. Wild had first stepped into the bookstore 2 years ago, and had since visited 5 times to borrow new books. Though infrequent at first glance, Wild's usual borrowing period was a month, meaning he had devoted 4 out of the 24 months over 2 years to this place, equivalent to a sixth of his time. This demonstrated his sincerity. In the 3 years Lin Jie had run the bookstore, business had been almost non-existent in the first year, so Wild was considered a veteran regular. Lin Jie also frequently offered Wild guidance and counsel. Old people, especially empty nesters, were susceptible to mental and psychological issues, and Old Will was definitely one such person. Lin Jie had heard that Old Will had 2 estranged children and a departed lover. He was excluded by colleagues and feared by others because of his appearance, leading to a lonely life in the vast city of Norzen. Although Old Will lacked nothing materially, there was a gaping hole in the spiritual aspect of his life, caused not only by the lack of concern from friends and family but also by his lack of recognition from peers. Old Will was a linguistics expert and academic with a great interest in researching rare languages. Those in his field often became accustomed to solitude, but the pain of being misunderstood was difficult to bear. Lin Jie chose to approach him from this angle. From their first meeting, Lin Jie made sure to look Old Will in the eye and treat him with respect to win his goodwill. From the books Old Will brought to sell, Lin Jie deduced considerable information and casually recommended a book, Wenzhounese. Dubbed the Devil's Language, Wenzhounese was considered one of the most difficult languages in China. In the Wenzhou prefecture alone, there were more than 12 variants of this language. During wartime, it was even used as a secret code that enemies could not decipher. Old Will's expression shifted from lackluster to skeptical to frightened before he became consumed with ecstasy, exclaiming that the language was truly demonic. Lin Jie felt the significance of his small act of kindness. The happiness of a life mentor could be as simple as this. Since there was no Wenzhou nor China in the land known as Azir, Lin Jie explained that the book had come from a long-lost place in time. Lin Jie was a transmigrator who had come from Earth to this vast country named Azir. Many transmigrators existed in the cosmos, but Lin Jie was unique because his transmigration was, to some degree, voluntary. It all began with Lin Jie's hobby. He was a compulsive book collector whose greatest wish was to collect all printed books in the world. Even though he could not finish reading all of them, the thought of having all those hardcover books arranged neatly on shelves was enough to satisfy him. However, this was an impossible undertaking. China alone printed over 90,000 new books every 6 months, and purchasing all of them would cost around 4 million RMB, which was financially impossible. Additionally, obtaining out-of-print or banned books required unimaginable time and effort. This was merely Lin Jie's pipe dream until one day he discovered a ritual that could realize any wish at a price. Skeptical but curious, Lin Jie conducted the ritual and wished to obtain all books in the world. Immediately, he heard a gentle muttering he could not understand, then found himself in another world standing before an abandoned bookstore. An inexplicable thought told him his dream could be fulfilled if he entered, but the price was never to return to Earth. Without hesitation, the lonesome Lin Jie pushed open the bookstore's door and entered. 3 years had passed since then, and Lin Jie had grown accustomed to living in Norzen City. The technological level was similar to Earth's 80s and 90s, and language was not a barrier since both English and Chinese characters were used for historical reasons. Differences included strange names and crazy hair colors. Lin Jie had also heard rumors of an inner world and extraordinary beings but had yet to see any. Lin Jie had not truly felt the price he paid for his wish. He was content with his life, The bookshelves refreshed daily, and he could conduct manual searches himself. With endless books to read and customers to offer guidance, he had nothing more to ask for. Wilde's raspy voice interrupted, stating he had recently reached a bottleneck in his research and found a new direction thanks to the loan of Devil's Language 2 years ago. However, he needed more clues and documents on similar languages. Lin Jie wondered if calling a proper book The Devil's Language was some inside joke among academics as he walked to the counter and wrote, "Returned," in one of the columns. He asked Wilde if he wished to borrow a similar type of book. Wilde explained that the previous book was too profound and felt like a small part of a whole. He needed something more detailed, ideally with the language's context included. The previous book had too many influences from other languages and customs, making it complex. He needed to better understand the meanings within. After 2 years, Wilde had finally found clues regarding forbidden curses in that book, which could be his opportunity to ascend to supreme rank. Magicians crafted spells through language and characters. Black magicians used verbal languages, enchanted curses, and white magicians inscribed sigils with characters. As a top-notch black magician, Wilde had mastered basic incantations, but now needed to draw out his inner soul's potential to break through. He needed to find the voice of his own soul. The final calling of a black magician was to create a language belonging solely to himself, the path to supreme rank. Lin Jie replied that he would find something suitable and asked Wilde to wait. Wilde nodded and began browsing the shelves behind Lin Jie. Lin Jie considered old Will's request carefully. Although the languages in this world resembled those of Earth, the cultural and customary differences meant some divergence existed between the two worlds. It would be difficult for old Will to fully grasp Chinese culture, so Lin Jie resolved to find books with a broader research scope suitable for him. His forefinger slowly skimmed the bookshelf before coming to a halt. While Lin Jie searched for the right book, Wilde stared out at the gloomy downpour outside the store, reflecting on the past. 2 years earlier, during his escape after being defeated by Joseph, Wilde had stumbled upon this bookstore and met Lin Jie. Lin Jie had offered guidance and pointed him toward another path. Even now, Wilde's heart still raced and his body trembled at the memory of the book containing the language of devils and the mysticism and power infused within it, a sensation akin to first love. It reminded him of the moment he first witnessed a magician's power as a student, when his aged teacher extinguished the life of a beautiful bird with a single word, "Die." Amazement and shock had transformed his goals and beliefs into conviction. The present-day Wilde was far from the egoistic person he had been years ago, a change brought about by the selfless, all-knowing bookstore owner. Wilde had never asked about Lin Jie's past or identity but suspected in his heart that Lin Jie was a reclusive scholar of the Truth Union, possibly even the fabled supreme-rank great sage holding the key to the Truth Shrine. However, this was mere conjecture, as Wilde had never sensed any changes in the ether from Lin Jie. Wilde's thoughts were interrupted when Lin Jie pulled a book from the shelf. Wilde asked if he had found it. Clearing his throat, Lin Jie smiled and handed the book over, admitting it might sound presumptuous, but his gut feeling told him this book was right for Wilde. He expressed confidence in his research in this field. Wilde, puzzled by Lin Jie's slight embarrassment, glanced at the book's cover and saw the title and author's name, Ceremonies and Customs by Lin Jie. His expression changed as he handled the book even more gently, as if it were fragile glass. He realized Lin Jie had recommended his own work. Wilde examined the title Corpse Devouring Sect, Rites and Ceremonies, and cautiously asked if rites and ceremonies were Lin Jie's research area. The term Corpse Devouring Sect sounded like a religion, but Wilde had never heard of it before. In Azir, there were 3 main faiths: the Truth Union, the Church of the Dome, and the Church of Pestilence, along with other obscure religions. As a wandering magician, Wilde knew a little about these, but the corpse-devouring sect was unfamiliar. It sounded like a demonic tribe's religion that consumed humans, which made Wilde's heart shudder. He had assumed scholars like Lin Jie would be at least neutral, if not lawfully good, which was why he had not divulged much about himself. The charity of higher beings was usually temporary, so Wilde worried that Lin Jie might be toying with him, trying to talk a ruthless black magician into being good. He feared unimaginable consequences if he opposed this higher being's wishes. Yet, the book's sinister vibe left no doubt that the author aligned with evil. A formidable scholar researching taboo subjects was bound to be marginalized, possibly explaining Lin Jie's reclusive nature. Wilde looked at Lin Jie, who smiled gently and nodded with reminiscence, confirming that the book was part of his research that had changed his fate. Lin Jie dismissed the matter as something from long ago, not worth digging up again. Wilde noticed the book's slightly coarse, hand-bound cover and remarked on it. Lin Jie explained that unforeseen circumstances had prevented him from publishing the book, so he had retained this hand-printed copy. He decided to lend it to Wilde as kindred spirits but offered to recommend other books if Wilde did not trust him. Before his transmigration, Lin Jie had been a cultural studies doctorate student and lecturer, earning the title Teacher Lin. Providing advice and inspiration was not something he learned overnight. Had he not transmigrated, he likely would have become an associate professor and published multiple editions of his books on popular customs. While not especially outstanding among young scholars, he was confident in his specialization. Wilde bowed slightly, expressing honor at reading Lin Jie's work but admitted unease at the only copy of such an important book being in the hands of an old man. As a crafty magician, Wilde was not worried about losing it but recognized the book's experimental nature and the potential for unimaginable outcomes from studying it. It seemed Lin Jie saw him as a guinea pig. Lin Jie reassured Wilde that there was nothing to worry about and believed Wilde would bring more value to the book. His research only had worth when seen by others. Regarding the book being the only copy, Lin Jie smiled and gestured to the bookshelf behind him, saying he now possessed an entire forest of books and could easily produce replacements. Knowledge in one's mind could not be stolen, while fame and fortune were immaterial. Lin Jie looked intently at Wilde, urging him to accept the book as his last offering of guidance. He sensed Wilde's apprehension was not about the subject but about the consequences of studying it. Although Wilde appeared amiable, his haughty and detached disposition had distanced him from friends and family, making academic accomplishment, fame, and fortune vital to filling the void in his heart. However, this mentality only further isolated him from society. Lin Jie resolved to guide Wilde toward experiencing care and concern from others once again. Wilde met Lin Jie's gaze and was momentarily startled. He removed his hat, his fingers trembling, and expressed that he had benefited from Lin Jie's advice. Lin Jie noticed Wilde's unease and suspected that Wilde feared revealing his identity. The black magician's heart grew heavier. Lin Jie then returned to the topic, mentioning that since Wilde could understand the devil's language, he should be able to comprehend the book and, if he found it valuable, recommend it to others. He smiled politely, hinting at deeper meanings. Wilde nodded at the book in Lin Jie's hand and promised to do his utmost. He realized that Lin Jie wanted him to help propagate the work, accepting this as the price to pay. His heart lightened, though he knew free favors did not exist. Wilde understood that continued generosity from Lin Jie would likely demand an even heavier price, perhaps his life. He resolved to study the book carefully and pass its contents on verbally without revealing the author's identity. Wilde prepared to leave, placing his hat back on. After a brief hesitation, he drew a jet-black stone sculpture from his chest pocket and placed it on the countertop, thanking Lin Jie for his guidance and offering it as a small token of appreciation. Lin Jie picked up the sculpture, recognizing it as a gargoyle about 30 centimeters tall and 10 centimeters wide, with a pedestal, horns, a pointed tail, and bat-like wings, resembling a spawn of the devil. He marveled at how Wilde had concealed it in his clothes. The sculpture's detailed craftsmanship and eerie red glow from its eyes made it seem alive. Lin Jie's heart pounded briefly, but the rough stone texture reminded him it was only a sculpture. Wilde confirmed the gift's significance, acknowledging it was not precious compared to Lin Jie's help but promising to bring an even more valuable gift next time. Lin Jie initially considered declining out of habit but recognized Wilde's sincerity and accepted the gargoyle, noting its similarity to Chinese stone tablets that ward off evil and convey blessings. Lin Jie placed the gargoyle back on the countertop, smiling and praising it as a fine piece of art. expressing anticipation for Wild's next gift. Wild sighed in relief. He had kept the gargoyle for many years as his graduation piece from his apprenticeship, crafted using rare materials infused with the blood, souls, and vitality of 990 people. The gargoyle possessed hard skin impervious to weapons, sharp teeth and claws, powerful wings, and the ability to sense killing intent, comparable to a pandemonium rank warrior. Though Wild had initially felt pleased to display his work, Lin Jie's description as a piece of art reminded him that the gargoyle was modest compared to the value of Lin Jie's books. Wild prepared an even more significant gift for the future, confident it would impress even a supreme rank being. Before leaving the bookstore, Wild assured Lin Jie he would be pleased. Lin Jie waved him off and sighed, considering the day's business done as rain poured outside. Securing 2 customers in such weather was rare, and Lin Jie did not desire more. He murmured that maintaining a good attitude brought luck, sipped his tea, and toyed with the gargoyle before setting it down again. Under the dim light, the demonic sculpture seemed ready to spread its wings and hunt. Lin Jie rotated it so its glowing eyes faced the entrance, imagining it would scare off any intruders even during daylight. He appreciated this as an effective anti-theft mechanism and began tidying the counter. While putting away teacups, Lin Jie noticed wet spots on the tabletop moving slowly, gathering to form the words, "It's been a while." Shocked, he recognized the sensation from when he was brought before the bookstore 3 years prior. He understood that the hidden hand responsible for sending him to this world had reappeared. Calming himself with deep breaths, Lin Jie sat again and addressed the message, asking if the price he was to pay had been decided. He aired grievances about being brought here suddenly without understanding the situation and joked about nearly starving without richer customers. He questioned if the entity was a devil to whom people sold their souls. The wet spots formed a no. Lin Jie grumbled that devils were usually more exploitative. He then demanded to know what was required of him, sitting upright with crossed arms and watching the water stains. Lin Jie accepted that he must pay the price due, even if delayed 3 years. He valued fulfilling contractual agreements and acknowledged that, despite unclear conditions, his dream had become reality. Lin Jie considered that enjoying a bonus 3 years before the agreement was established was already a win. Furthermore, the entity summoned by the ceremony had a mild disposition, leading him to reckon it might be a benevolent spirit like the genie from Aladdin's lamp. He watched in surprise as the water stains formed the words, "You have already accomplished it. I have awakened." He wondered if, after granting his wish, the entity had been dormant for 3 years until he completed a certain task that granted it energy to awaken. The entity confirmed this. Lin Jie asked if the task involved asking Old Will to recommend his book to others, and the entity affirmed. When he inquired if this was the price he must pay, to have others recommend and propagate his books, the entity agreed, confirming it benefited from this. Satisfied with the straightforward arrangement, Lin Jie pledged to work hard. The water spots on the table disappeared instantly, leaving no trace of the exchange. Shortly after Wild's silhouette vanished into the rain, a hooded figure in a dark alley peered out, eyes fixed in Wild's direction as he pulled out a cell phone. Ether swirled in the air, creating a barrier that prevented sound from escaping. Jack reported spotting the faceless black-scaled man, Wild, at Northern 23rd Avenue, suspecting his involvement in the hunter's internal conflict. He added that Wild had stopped at a bookstore for an hour, suspecting it might be a secret base for black magicians. Joseph looked up from his documents as a golden-haired youth entered. He invited Claude in, asking if there was news regarding the magic of a mirror incident and muttering about troublesome hunters. Standing, Joseph revealed his muscular frame and daunting aura, expressing disdain for the hunters. Claude apologized and explained there was a new development. Joseph, irritated, knocked on his desk, causing his mechanical arm to crackle and the desk to shake. He cursed the hunters for preventing his retirement. Claude advised Joseph to mind his image, but Joseph dismissed the concern, noting the door was closed. Claude placed a file on the desk and reported that the informant tracking the hunter situation had spotted Wild on 23rd Avenue. Joseph's eyes narrowed as he asked who Wilde was. Claude explained that Wilde, Frank Wilde, known as the Faceless Black-Scaled Man, was deemed a destructive rank black magician by the Truth Union. He had disappeared 2 years ago after the battle at the White Hills, with a bounty increasing yearly, causing opposition within Secret Right Tower. Joseph sneered, saying Wilde had finally reappeared and expressing hope that Wilde's brain was now more than just water. Joseph asked what Wilde was doing on 23rd Avenue, pressing his hands on the desk. Claude replied that Wilde had entered an ordinary-looking bookstore and stayed for over an hour, as if buying or borrowing books. Joseph scoffed at the idea of a black magician gaining power from language by buying books, suspecting something was wrong with the bookstore and asking if it had been investigated. Claude said the bookstore was listed under the Ash Chamber of Commerce and had operated for 3 years. Though business was slow, it had a good reputation, and the owner being an out-of-towner was the only anomaly. Initially suspected as a black magician hideout, they were now unsure. Joseph asked what caused the uncertainty. Claude explained that the Ash Chamber of Commerce belonged to Druids, believers in nature and forests, unlikely to associate with black magicians. Reckless action might provoke the Druids to report to Secret Right Tower. Joseph slammed his palm on the desk, cursing the Druids. Claude corrected that Druids weren't vegetarian. Joseph dismissed the correction and declared that anyone could be an accomplice of darkness and that Knight's mission was to eliminate darkness. He questioned whether Wilde would spend an hour in a bookstore reading. Joseph ranted that a diabolical black magician plotting revenge would not be inside an ordinary bookstore reading. Claude threatened to kick Joseph if he truly believed that. Claude refrained from retorting further and mockingly noted that the Ash Chamber of Commerce provided 40% of their intelligence branch's expenditure. Joseph's face stiffened. After taking deep breaths, he put on a necktie and coat, his large frame resembling a Western-styled mobster. He declared he would visit 23rd Avenue personally to see the place. Claude bowed and opened the door for him. Joseph strode out and headed to the elevators, greeted by passers-by in Secret Right Tower. They addressed him as Abraham Joseph, one of the 10 Radiant Knights of Secret Right Tower, or rather, a former Radiant Knight. The battle at the White Hills had left Wilde severely injured and forced into hiding, while Joseph suffered great physical and spiritual damage, leading him to semi-retirement and a transfer to intelligence work within Secret Right Tower. Joseph pressed a button in the central elevator, which began its slow descent. Secret Right Tower, towering over 300 meters, housed tightly packed office districts and pathways resembling honeycombs, divided into intelligence, training, combat, and logistics branches. 49 large elevators continuously rose and descended, transporting thousands of workers daily. As the elevator doors slowly opened, Joseph muttered to himself about sorting out the nature of a hallowed being named Lin Jie, then suddenly covered his eyes, cursing the return of hallucinations. He steadied himself by gripping the wall, drawing strength from the chilling wind and rain outside. The surrounding pathways were flooded and deserted, as storm warnings had prompted a tenth of Northern City's residents to evacuate. Secret Right Tower's covert operations had contributed to this emptiness, particularly on 23rd Avenue. Joseph reflected on the internal conflict caused by foolish hunters bringing the magic of a mirror into Northern City, which had been lost, unsettling the citizens. He foresaw the possibility of a dream beast emerging from the dream realm, bringing destruction. The throbbing pain in his head and the whispers subsided, and he grimaced as he examined his hands. Beyond losing his arm and sustaining many internal injuries, Joseph's retirement from the Radiant Knights was due to the curse of the demon's sword Candela, which he once wielded. The sword's original owner had gone mad and died, leaving a curse that drove wielders insane unless they possessed perfect spirit and will. Once a powerful knight, Joseph had lost that strength to age and injury, and without a successor to Candela, he continued to suffer its backlash. At night, he often saw massive shadows in the city and heard the sword's maddened muttering, tormenting him. At the foot of a towering, abandoned church, Ji Jixio stood gripping her cane as her black windbreaker flapped in the fierce wind. Behind Ji Jixio were her most loyal subordinates, Kai, Marcus, and Ruin. As second leader of the hunter group White Wolves, Ji Jishio had once commanded many more, but betrayal and bloodshed had reduced her followers to these 3 survivors. The magic of a mirror, in its larval state, had beguiled people with thoughts of covetousness, triggering irreversible chaos. Norzen's rainstop had become a battleground among hunters. Kai and Marcus, longtime subordinates and followers of Ji Jishio's father, had their consciousness bound by her family's white magician sigil, preserving their mental clarity against the mirror's erosion. Ruin, who had only recently surrendered and accepted the sigil, had been a subordinate of the first leader, Harris. He had defected after witnessing Ji Jishio's ruthless methods and the corpses left in the wake of her beast mutation state. Kai, a tall, slender woman with striking features and dressed fashionably, but wielding a bloodied sawtooth sword, informed Ji Jishio softly that the magic of a mirror was in Harris's hands. Harris had become deranged and massacred hunters after seizing the mirror. Kai worried that Harris had allied with the third leader, Kaji, and feared their strength was insufficient for the assault. Marcus agreed, noting Harris's strength as the closest to Pandemonium rank among the White Wolves and Kaji's influence as trainer of nearly half the organization's hunters. Despite defections due to Harris's insanity, many still followed them, making victory unlikely. Ruin, eyeing Ji Jishio nervously but flattering her, insisted that despite Harris's faction's power, their leader's genuine Pandemonium rank strength and beast mutation ability would ensure Harris and Kaji would fall. Though uncertain of Ji Jishio's exact rank, Ruin sought favor, admitting he was an opportunist who aligned with the strongest and hoped to one day control the sordid blood. Ji Jishio flicked her cane to reveal a sharp blade and declared that hunters never retreat, urging them to enter for the final battle. The abandoned church, once built by the Church of Pestilence, formerly Azir's dominant faith before being usurped by the Truth Union, was strewn with hunter remains as the battle neared its end. Ji Jishio dispatched the last obstacle and strode into the main hall. Beneath the chapel's eaves, lit by light filtering through 7-colored stained glass, stood Kaji, the White Wolves' third leader. Tall and dressed in black clergyman robes with a long sickle strapped to his back, he bowed his head as if in prayer. Rainwater dripped through the neglected ceiling, pooling on the floor. Marcus asked where Harris was. Kaji responded with a sputtering sound. Ji Jishio's eyes narrowed as she rushed forward and pushed Kaji's shoulder, revealing his pained, twisted face and a large neck gash bleeding profusely. Ji Jishio urgently called for the injection. Marcus quickly handed over a syringe filled with sordid blood, which Ji Jishio seized and plunged into Kaji's heart, injecting the entire dose. The sordid blood took immediate effect. Kaji's neck wound began to writhe and shrink, his eyeballs spinning wildly before transforming into beastly pupils. He groaned in pain as teeth and nails elongated and hair rapidly sprouted across his body. Ji Jishio demanded to know where Harris was and whether he had fled with the magic of a mirror, staring intently into Kaji's eyes. Kaji nodded before throwing his head back and roaring with laughter, declaring that Harris would descend. Frustrated, Ji Jishio pounded her fist against the wall, surveying the chaotic main hall. Ruin, surprised, asked where they were headed. Ji Jishio replied, 23rd Avenue. On 23rd Avenue, Lin Jie sighed as he poured himself a cup of tea and began reading, noting yet another day of poor business. 3 days had passed since old Will and the affluent young lady had visited, and no customers had come despite the unrelenting rainstorm outside. The streets were quiet, water rising to about 10 centimeters, though 23rd Avenue sat on slightly higher ground. News reported that over 30 streets in Norzen had been evacuated due to the abnormal weather, a rare occurrence in the city's history. For Lin Jie, life continued as usual, except for the colder weather requiring a jacket. He had 3 months' worth of food reserves, a backup generator for power, and an extensive collection of books to occupy his time. His habit of hoarding books had developed into a compulsive reading routine, which suited his homebody lifestyle despite limited finances. Lin Jie reflected that it was thanks to the support of a dark-skinned young woman who had helped him obtain an operation license and temporary residence permit that he could maintain this modest yet fulfilling life. Past customers seemed busy, with infrequent visits even from regulars like Old Will. His first customer, Chili, a young dark-skinned lady with snow-white hair, had come when she was bullied at school. Lin Jie had counseled her and recommended the book Nonviolent Communication, but she had not returned since. He speculated that she was likely busy with her studies but acknowledged that her ability to get his unlicensed shop registered and sponsor a significant amount of money suggested she was an affluent young lady like Ji Jishio. The strange entity that had appeared that day had not re-emerged, and Lin Jie, having embraced his role as a transmigrator, felt idle once more. Over the past 3 days, he had reviewed all his past works, considering how best to promote his books, aware that academic promotion was difficult and that few specialists like Old Will existed. Suddenly, the bronze bell above the door chimed softly, interrupting his thoughts. Lin Jie looked up and greeted the visitor, recognizing Ji Jishio, who had first come a few days earlier. Slightly stunned, he quickly adopted a professional smile. He thought to himself that perhaps Ji Jishio's return signaled a change in his bookstore's fortunes and resolved to nurture her as a valued customer. Ji Jishio bit her lip, feeling a wave of shame for having to return for help after receiving powerful guidance, questioning her own usefulness among his customers. She sensed no mockery in Lin Jie's encouraging and concerned smile, which only deepened her embarrassment. Apologizing softly for disappointing him, she approached the counter and sat down. Her attention was drawn to a sculpture on the countertop, a magician's gargoyle. Although she detected no ether fluctuations from it, the presence of such an item, along with the mysterious book blood and beast the owner had revealed earlier, hinted at hidden depths within the unassuming bookstore. At that moment, Ruin entered, pushing open the door and surveying the place with suspicion. He questioned whether this was where Ji Jishio had intended to bring him, a bookstore. His gaze shifted to Lin Jie behind the counter, whom he perceived as an ordinary person, but he kept his suspicions to himself, noting Ji Jishio's respectful attitude. Lin Jie was pleasantly surprised to see that Ji Jishio had brought someone along and asked her to introduce him. Ji Jishio gestured for Ruin to remain silent and explained that he was her subordinate, assuring Lin Jie of Ruin's absolute loyalty. Lin Jie cast a sympathetic look at Ji Jishio and nodded in understanding. Lin Jie observed Ji Jishio more closely and noticed the ashamed look in her eyes. He crossed his arms and asked solemnly if she had failed. Ji Jishio took a deep breath and admitted with anger and disappointment that she had failed. The man had escaped, and his current whereabouts were unknown. She had sent people to search for him but had found no clues yet. Lin Jie frowned, recognizing the seriousness of the situation. He had recently researched Ji Banong and his Raw Resource Development Company, a large corporation monopolizing Norzen's lower district resource development sector with many subsidiaries in jewelry, cosmetics, and foodstuff. The company had close ties to Norzen's administration and held exclusive recruitment rights in the lower district. Contact with lower district personnel was strictly prohibited for outsiders, with severe punishments including life imprisonment and family banishment to the Church of Pestilence. From this information, Lin Jie understood the uniqueness of Raw Resource Development Company and Ji Jishio's highborn status. Despite her grand background and many suitors, she had been cheated badly by a scoundrel who must have held a high position and possibly had criminal accomplices, explaining her inability to find him and enact revenge. Lin Jie smiled reassuringly and pushed a cup of hot tea toward Ji Jishio, telling her to calm down and explain what she had done to the man in the past few days. He sensed her shaken resolve but believed the scoundrel's escape was a sign of partial success and that, given her family's power, his disappearance was only temporary. Ji Jishio's heart raced when she saw Lin Jie's furrowed brows, fearing he might replace her with someone else. However, his smile returned as he poured her tea, easing her anxiety. She accepted the cup and recounted how she had fought the man continuously for 2 days, growing stronger under Lin Jie's guidance and forcing him into retreat. After a 5-hour ruthless assault, she had destroyed his headquarters but realized he had abandoned his comrades and fled alone, aware he was no match for her. She admitted she had underestimated him and apologized for her complacency. Lin Jie reassured her it was not her fault but took a sip of tea to hide a slight twitch at the corner of his lips. He thought about how love was like a battlefield and noted Ji Zhixio's businesslike expressions, suspecting she might be accustomed to secret society dynamics, especially since Ruin had called her boss. He inferred that her confrontation with the scoundrel had been a prolonged and intense struggle, possibly involving accomplices who had been sacrificed to facilitate the man's escape. Lin Jie nodded, expressing understanding, and Ji Zhixio cautiously asked if he had any advice. Meanwhile, Ruin stood silently to the side, surveying the bookstore out of habit. Years as an information peddler and his role as a hunter in the White Wolves had made him an expert in gathering intelligence, with contacts even within the Truth Union. Although he adopted a modest stance, he took pride in his skills and knowledge of Northern City. Ruin was known as Rat for his cunning and survival instincts, traits he valued highly. The bloodline of the White Wolves came from the fierce sky wolf dream beast, and despite the irony, Ruin embraced his nickname. To him, being treacherous, cunning, and avaricious were positive qualities that ensured longevity. His acute senses and foresight were vital tools for preserving his life. Ruin had honed his skills for years since taking to the streets, switching allegiances and betraying countless times, always holding bargaining chips that could get him out of any situation. No one could kill him nor dared to try. Only Ruin himself knew the true extent of his intelligence network. This time he relied on a woman. When he witnessed the miraculous wolf-beast mutation that brought destruction and blood, followed by a graceful transformation back into human form, Ruin understood that the hunters of the night would soon have a new master. This woman would spark an unprecedented revolution. Yet even if she failed, nothing would happen to Ruin. He had already secretly obtained the method to dispel the magician's loyalty brand. He had survived by defecting and surrendering under false pretenses, while those he betrayed had long since perished. In uncertain times, those who clung foolishly to dead branches, like the third leader Kaji, only proved how worthless and dangerous trust was. When Ruin served under Harris, he had used these same tricks to make the White Wolves' leader believe in him. Now, deceiving this young, affluent lady was an easy task. Ruin had ambitions beyond being a rat scurrying in the sewers. If he could obtain the method to control beast mutation, he would gain unparalleled strength atop his intelligence network and become a king in broad daylight. Then everyone would want to serve him. He retracted his gaze from the surroundings and focused on the bookstore owner, scrutinizing the man carefully with all his 40 years of experience. Finally, he concluded the young man was ordinary. But his gaze shifted to Ji Zhixio, the female hunter who looked at the bookstore owner with utter reverence, as if facing a supreme-rank powerhouse. Ruin was perplexed. Had his senses dulled with age? No, he was confident in his judgment. Not long ago, he had accurately predicted Harris's big move and switched allegiance in time to avoid slaughter. This time, he chose to trust himself again. Still, given the reverence shown to this man and Ruin's cautious nature, he decided to observe what priceless advice the bookstore owner might offer to deserve such treatment. Meanwhile, Lin Jie's thoughts were simple. He wanted to calm Ji Zhixio's impatience and assure her that the scum she feared was not his equal. All she needed was to wait.